What's up YouTube? This is the Psy-Frame Duelist here, coming at you guys with a new video today. It ain't going to be a deck profile, but what it will be is a very brief introduction into the dueling styles of Psy-Frames. So, it's not going to be an in-depth, intricate look as to what Psy-Frames do. I can make a video like that if you want me to. Just let me know in the comments down below, and I'll do it one step at a time. Psy-Frames isn't a deck that you can just pick up and say, hey, I can do this, I know all the combos to this, but it can be, but not exact. Like, it's a deck where once you get the hang of it, the way it plays and when to start to use the effects, then you can actually use the deck more effectively. And I'm not going to say that my build is the all end all, because it's not, and there are better builds out there than mine. But what I can say is that if you do net deck my decks, I want to at least explain to you why I run cards when I do what the deck is made to do, because every deck can be made to do something different, and you may be getting my deck trying to do something that's not supposed to. I want to correct all those mistakes and address them in a video like this one where I can show you what I'm doing. So I'm going to just keep shuffling my deck for right now just to get it very, very randomized, because I'm not doing a deck profile. I don't want it all to be similar. I'll even cut my own deck just to make sure it's completely random. I can't get in, like I said before, I can't get into all the intricacies because that's going to involve two players. That's going to involve me and my opponent, because it's not like a synchro turbo deck where I can just draw 5 cards, show you the combo, and then that's the combo. This deck basically relies heavily on what your opponent does, but I can show 5 cards and say what would I do in this situation. Let's get into this. So it's pretty shuffled up right now. Just cut it, just to make sure. So let's get our 5 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we got our 5 cards off the bat. And what do we got? We start out with a Delta, a Terraforming. And this is assuming that I'm the one that's going first, okay? We got a Pot of Duality, a Delta, and a Psychic Field Zone. So not a bad hand, honestly. It could be worse, it could be better. It sets me up, it lets me get going. So what I would do firstly is I would immediately activate Terraforming, very first thing I do, because I got my deltas, I've got my protection from my field spell. So what I would do is I'd immediately go into my deck. If they said that's all good, which usually they do, I go right into my deck and I look for my field spell, wherever it happens to be. It's right here. So I just go, I search up my field spell, and then I immediately activate it without doing anything else. So I'd get it and I'd tell my opponent, hey, activate, and usually they say, okay, whatever. So that goes to grave. It's what this deck does is it stuns and then strikes, kind of, and it needs this too. So I can do this, and the Psy-Frame deck doesn't do much on their own turn, so there isn't much for me to tell you. All of the intricacies usually happen on your opponent's turn. So, but once the new support comes out in Invasion Vengeance, we'll get more turbo action-ish. Okay, so what I would do next is I would immediately go for Pot of Duality. So, say I went for Pot of Duality now, I'd get Circuit, Driver, and Overload. So, in this situation, I want to go for my Overload because that's going to get me some major mileage out of my deck. So I would put this back and I would reshuffle my deck again because I did that. Okay, and at this point my opponent already knows that they're against Psy-Frame, assuming they haven't scooped, because a lot of people just don't want to play against Psy-Frames, and I can understand that. It's a deck you don't want to go up against. It's really reliant on your opponent, and apparently people don't like decks that do that. So, next, I would set one card, and then simply end my turn. The reason why I would do that is because I know I have this face down. If it gets MST'd or it gets Twin Twistered, whatever, then it goes to grave, and my next turn I can immediately banish it. Oh, sorry, my grave's kind of off the camera real quick. You know what it is. It's terraforming in a pot of duality, and I can just banish it and get my search out. I know what I'm running. I got these 3 cards in my hand. I could set the field zone, but I don't because I want to keep this in hand. Sorry if I got quieter. My family's upstairs right now. I don't want to disturb them. But yeah, I know I got 2 deltas, so I can negate 2 spell cards. And I got the 3rd one in my hand just so my opponent constantly has to think about what I have. You know, I could use both of my deltas, keep my psychic field zone, and they won't attack thinking it's a beta because I want to keep their stuff. Which is, you know, it's fair enough. Sorry if this is, you know, in the top of your screen or whatever. I'm doing it from my perspective, which is my face is down this way. So I'm sorry about that. But that's kind of the way I've been recording all along. Anywho. So, and what my deck was to be based on is get the cards it needs to with cards like these and these. To get the monsters that it needs to get the negates it needs to. So I'm going to assume that my opponent would then immediately try to MST or Twin Twister my circuit while this is face down. I can just negate that with Delta immediately. And then what I would do is I would immediately go in here and I would search out my driver. And then as I'm shuffling my deck, I would call circuit saying it's activating. And they'd say, you know, no response, or they'd have a response. Either or. If they don't get rid of circuit by the time it needs to resolve, usually it doesn't happen, but if they don't, then you can just immediately synchro summon into an Omega. And the funny thing about Omega is that as soon as he hits the board, if you want to keep going with your Psy-Frames plays, you can immediately use its effect to rip a card out of their hand as soon as it hits the board as a response to its own synchro summon. That is a legal play you can do, so no fear on that. And you can do the exact same thing with Zeta too. He has the same clause to where you can do it to its own summon too, if you need to do that. I usually like to keep that face down just as the fear factor of what I have. They don't know. But yeah, so what'll usually end up happening, a lot of the times they'll try to either force you to activate something or you'll interrupt their plays. I said it's a very stun based deck. It's very like stunny. You can activate this and then you can banish this from your hand. You banish this from your hand, and then banish a card on their side of the field. And then if you get driver in your banish zone too, which is possible, then you can just activate field zone, get them in the graveyard, and then immediately synchro summon into one of these in defense position. Which is another thing you can do. Or if you have one of him and a 1, or if you have him and a 2, you can use field zone and you can get out him or him based on your prerogative. You can either go Hyper Psychic Blast or Overmind Archfiend. I personally like to go for Overmind Archfiend just because he's stronger. I don't really use his effect all that much, but if I can, or if I want to, I can. But usually I'll use these guys' effects in grave as soon as they get there. It's pretty important too. He gets a Psy-Frame card back in your hand, which is actually very useful because in my side here, I play an ulti Fog King when I pulled out of a pack. So what I could do is if I have a Zeta on field and I'm against Monarchs, I can just go Fog King, Zeta to Grave, Zeta effect, Zeta get Delta or any other Psy-Frame card you need at the time. Put this back to the extra deck, get your Psy-Frame in hand. Fog King doesn't allow them to tribute. And then if they haven't scooped already, they're probably sitting there crying their eyes out because they can't stop you. Which is crazy. And it's what this deck is basically made to do. And I have no fear in my side about running cards that will stop me too. As long as it hurts my opponent first, like more importantly, like Mistake against draw cards or adding cards from the deck to the hand, Shadow Imprisoning for dark decks, Light Imprisoning for light decks. Even though it hurts me, like if it hurts my opponent more, like Blue Eyes, Light Imprisoning will negate everything they own and wish to own. And if they want to get rid of it, they gotta lose their MSTs or the Twin Twisters or their Cyclones or whatever they have. And they have to waste that on this, which is a valid play in my book. If they have to waste one of those to get rid of one of these, and I get to keep one of these and these on the field, then I will easily take that over losing these cards, because these cards are easily more valuable. These ones are just a distractor to stop my opponents from doing their stuff. So let's get back into what my deck does. So it is about stun, like this one is about stun, this one is about Psy-Frames, this one is about draw cards, this is about Psy-Frames, this is about draw, this is about frames, frames. You know, you get it. It's pretty, like in these first like draws I just did just now, like look at what I was able to manage to draw. Like this deck is actually pretty, sorry I was showing it off screen. This deck is pretty consistent with what it needs. Like this is the only odd card out. Everything else was either a frame or a draw card to get more of the frames, you know. And that's exactly what this deck is built to do. It's made for, if the card doesn't suit the deck, like helping it get to the frames, or to protect from direct attacks like this card, then it's not wanted in my deck. Ergo, why I don't run Wind Up Rabbits, why I took out my Gamma Seals, and just different things like that. Is used to get what it needs, like draw cards, frame. Also, if you open this card, then I feel sorry because this card you never want to open in your opening hand. Basically, your best opening hand for going first is this or Terraforming, Pot of Duality, Card D, wherever he ran off to, Card D, and as much of the gears as possible, of any different type of gear. Alpha, a lot of people say the search is like worthless because it's just a search, but you keep in mind you get to search anything, and so it acts as it keeps its place in your hand because it's giving you something else. So if you had 5 cards beforehand, instead of activating and resolving this card like you would a Delta, end up with 4 cards, you get the search back off and you end up with 5 cards back in hand where you can negate something else with one of these, assuming that, you know, you're still good to go, which usually you are. A lot of people don't really OTK you in the format we're in right now, in which case, you know, you probably shouldn't be resolving an alpha if you're against an OTK based deck, you know. But like Rivalry, that's just my little Tekken. I could take that out honestly, switch it for like an upstart or something. More dualities, more field zones, you know, it just helps you get what you need. So that's the consistency part of my deck. As you can see, my deck was actually very consistent in getting what it needed to. And it's stun because it's supposed to negate your opponent's stuff. So you can negate, stun, activate, go for this, and then you can just kill them for that. That's basically the gist of how you play a Psy-Frame deck. It's basically, you're just doing that over and over again until you kill your opponent off. And that's how I run my deck, is I just draw cards and play Psy-Frame cards. That's basically what my deck was made to do. And so if you're trying to play my deck and you're trying to like get huge cards on the field during your turn, and you're trying to do all these shenanigan wombo combos, trying to go for Trishula, trying to get Quasars on the field, you know, you're not going to be getting that with my deck. My deck is more based around the traditional Psy-Frame, get Omega, get Zeta, try to win via these cards, you know. That's what my deck is more or less based around. If you want to see a more wombo combo oriented deck, I can link one in the description of another Psy-Frame user I was watching. He gets out Quasars and all his shenanigans. I'll link it in one of his Quasar videos you can watch. I think it looks very nice. But that's not the way I run my deck. And I'm not saying that that's the be all end all. Traditional Psy-Frames is the best Psy-Frames, any of that. No, it's just the Psy-Frames I prefer, and it's the Psy-Frames that I want to play. But there are better. I'm sure that there are better Psy-Frame decks than this. I just tried to make it as consistent as possible, so I took out like all the wind-up rabbits, all the dark holes, all the other stuff. I'm thinking about putting in some Maxis. I'm debating on what to take out right now. Maybe a Soul Charge or something, or a Burial. Maybe I'll take those cards out in lieu for a Maxi, just so I can get more consistent draw power. But that's really it when it comes to my deck. Like, it's not that complicated, honestly. But I felt like I should let this, you know, make this video because I just felt like if you know, net deck, you don't really get the gist of like what the deck's made to do. You get the list of the cards of what the deck is made out of, and then it's like, boom, there you go. Figure it out. So I want to let you know like what my deck does, why I run the cards that I run, what it's made to do. It's just made for consistency, honestly. Consistency and Psy-Frames. Like, that's it. That's the whole show, is consistency and Psy-Frames. You're not going to be getting wind-up rabbits. You're not going to be getting Yang Zings with me. So if you're wanting that, I'm so sorry. I'm sure that you can find one of those. You know, you basically run this deck and then take out some of the consistency factors, and then put in your wind-up rabbits, put in your Yosenjus, you know, etc., etc. I take this card out, but, you know, I'll just keep it in for right now until I find the need to take it out. But in the end, I have a feeling that this card's going to get taken out eventually, because it doesn't help me with what I need to do. It's just a distractor play, which would make it go into the side deck, which I might just do that. I might just put it in the side deck, because I really do like this card in this deck. But it just doesn't help advance me getting to my gears and whatnot. Also, I don't recommend Potted Desires in this deck. Yes, you get the +1, and yes, I know how important that is. But if you banish too much of what you need, like this, then you just lose the game. After Multi-Threaded comes out, then I would start advocating it more. But as it stands right now, I just wouldn't recommend it, because as I explained earlier, this is the whole show for the deck. But when Multi-Threaded comes out, it's also considered a driver. So I'm running 6 drivers essentially in one of these decks. So I might bump it down to 2 to make it 5 drivers instead. But still, like, the chance of milling 5 drivers is like near impossible. So I might start advocating it. But for right now, I wouldn't. Sure, you'll have a higher chance of milling one of them, but not all 5 of them. I don't see that at all. And if I mill a multi-threader and it keeps my drivers in my deck, I'll take that. I'll take that over it any day. But yeah, that's basically how it is. When I go into time, I got my Life Transfer, Black Roads for board wipes. You know, just the basic, Psy-Frame deck. It's not too crazy, not too combo oriented. I might turn to more one of those types of decks after Accelerator comes out, but that we'll just wait to see what the meta looks like at that point. See if any new ban lists come out. See what happens. But until then, like, that's basically it. That's basically how the deck is. I know I went on a little rant there. I'm so sorry for that. But yeah. Like, comment, subscribe, I guess. Do all the things you normally do. And yeah. And I hope everyone out there has a wonderful, wonderful rest of their day. And bye.